framed, hunted, and betrayed, the man who took on corrupt power. What would you do if the system you swore to protect turned against you? David Cole was a man who spent his life chasing justice. A decorated FBI director, a loving father, a man who believed in the power of the truth. But one night, on a lonely stretch of highway, everything changed. A routine traffic stop spiraled into a nightmare. Beaten. Arrested. Branded a criminal. His name dragged through the mud by the very officers sworn to uphold the law. The media turned him into a villain. His own badge, worthless. But David wasn't just a victim. He was a target. Someone powerful wanted him buried. Someone pulling the strings from the shadows. And as the walls closed in, he had to make an impossible choice: run and lose everything, or fight back against a system built to destroy him. What he uncovered was bigger than he ever imagined. A conspiracy stretching to the highest levels of government. Corrupt cops. Crooked politicians. And a secret so dangerous, they would kill to keep it hidden. But here's the thing about David Cole: he doesn't run. This is the story of a man who lost everything in the pursuit of justice. A man who took on the untouchable and dared to win. But victory comes at a cost. Will he survive the fight? Will justice prevail? Or will the truth die with him? Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't forget. Hit like if you believe in standing up against corruption. Comment below, do you think David can beat the system? And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, this story is just getting started. David Cole had always believed in doing things the right way. As the director of the Houston FBI office, he had spent 20 years upholding the law, ensuring justice was served. But on this quiet Texas night, with the highway stretching dark and empty before him, none of that mattered. The drive home had started like any other. His silver sedan cruised steadily at 55 miles per hour, exactly the speed limit. Highway 80 was desolate this time of night, the only company being the distant howl of coyotes and the hum of his jazz station crackling through the radio. The air conditioning hummed, pushing out a cool breeze against the lingering warmth of the 90-degree desert air. David's hands rested firmly at 10 and 2, a habit ingrained from years of knowing that a black man behind the wheel had to be perfect. Then, it happened. A sudden flash of red and blue lights exploded in his rearview mirror. No siren. No warning. Just a piercing glow that sank into his gut like a stone. David's heart tightened. He knew the drill. Too many times, he had seen this play out before, not just in his life, but in the lives of others who never got to tell their side of the story. His mind raced through possibilities. He hadn't been speeding. His taillights worked. His registration was up to date. There was no reason for this stop. Unless the reason wasn't about the car at all. For a few seconds, he considered keeping on driving. Not to run, no, never to run. But to find a well-lit gas station, a place with cameras, witnesses. Somewhere safer than the dark stretch of highway where no one would see what happened next. But he knew better. That could be twisted into evading police. So, with a slow, steady breath, he signaled, even though there was no one to see it, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. His tires crunched against the dirt, kicking up dust as he came to a stop. His hand stayed on the wheel, fingers spread wide, palms up, where they could be seen. The last thing he wanted was to make the wrong move. Through the rearview mirror, he watched as the officer stepped out of the patrol car, his figure illuminated by the harsh glare of headlights. Tall. Lean. Moving with the slow confidence of a man who enjoyed the power he carried. David inhaled deeply, forcing calm into his chest. Stay polite. Stay composed. Don't give them a reason. The officer approached with heavy boots crunching against the gravel, stopping just outside the driver's side window. David kept his gaze forward, waiting, not daring to move. Then, the voice came, sharp, biting. License and registration. Now. No, sir. No explanation. Not even the usual, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" David turned his head slightly, careful not to move too fast. He saw the man's face then. Mid-40s, sunburned neck, pale blue eyes that held something colder than authority. Something personal. "Here we go," David thought, his fingers tightening just slightly around the wheel. He spoke, keeping his voice even, respectful. "Good evening, officer. Can I ask why I was pulled over?" The cop's lip curled, his expression darkening as though David had offended him just by speaking. "Did I stutter, boy?" And just like that, the air turned electric. David felt it in his bones, the shift. This wasn't about a traffic stop. This wasn't about the law. This was about something older, something uglier, something that had followed men like him for generations. He swallowed hard. This night was about to go very, very wrong. David Cole had been here before. Not on this exact stretch of Highway 80, not with this exact officer, but the situation. It was all too familiar. The moment the word "boy" left the officer's lips, something in David's chest tightened like a fist. He had heard it before, too many times in his 48 years. It wasn't a simple word. It was a warning. A declaration that this officer, this man, saw him as less than. David inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay calm. No sudden moves. No anger. No resistance. Just get home. Just get through this. He reached slowly, very slowly, toward the glove compartment. "I'm getting my registration now," he said, his voice measured. The officer didn't acknowledge him. Didn't say go ahead. Instead, David heard the soft, familiar sound of a gun unsnapping from its holster. His fingers froze. His breath caught. Dear God, not like this. The officer's hand hovered over his holstered gun, his knuckles white against the leather grip. "Move any faster, and you won't live to regret it," the cop muttered. The words sliced through the night, chilling despite the thick Texas heat. David's heart pounded, his hands instinctively rising back up, palms open. He wants me scared, David realized. He wants me to feel small. He had seen this kind of power play before, on the streets of Atlanta where he started his career, in interrogation rooms where the guilty squirmed, and now, here, on the side of a dark road where no one would see if this went bad. David could feel his pulse hammering at his temple. He was a decorated FBI agent, a man who had stood toe-to-toe with cartel bosses and human traffickers, yet here he was, being treated like nothing more than a dangerous suspect for simply existing. "You nervous, boy?" the officer sneered. David clenched his jaw. He had been raised to respect authority. He had built his entire career around defending the rule of law. But this wasn't law. This was something else. This was about power. "I'd just like to follow your instructions, officer," he said carefully. The cop smirked like he'd won something. "Then step out of the car." David hesitated. Why? He hadn't been given a reason for the stop, let alone why he needed to get out. If I refuse, they'll say I'm not cooperating. If I do, I might not get back in this car alive. Still, he knew refusing would only escalate things further. Slowly, he unbuckled his seatbelt, his broad shoulders stiff as he pushed the door open. As soon as his dress shoes hit the dirt, the officer grabbed his arm, jerking him forward with unnecessary force. David bit down the pain that shot through his shoulder. "Turn around, hands on the car." David's jaw tightened, but he complied. The officer kicked his legs apart roughly, pressing him against the hot metal of the sedan's hood. The second officer, a stocky man who had been lingering near the patrol car, finally approached, his nightstick tapping lazily against his palm. "What's the matter?" "Big city fed doesn't like a little frisking," he chuckled. David closed his eyes for a second, forcing himself to breathe. "They don't know who I am. Or worse, they do, and it doesn't matter." A rough hand slapped against his pockets, patting him down with more aggression than necessary. Then, something changed. The first officer's hand gripped the back of David's neck, shoving him harder against the car. "Where's the gun?" the officer demanded. David's breath caught. "I don't have a gun," he said firmly. "Liar," the cop hissed. David's mind raced. They were trying to plant a reason to justify what they were doing. He knew how this worked. He had seen victims tell their stories after the fact, if they lived to tell them. The stocky officer smirked, gripping his baton a little tighter. "Bet you got drugs in this fancy car, too." David forced himself to stay still, but rage burned beneath his skin like wildfire. "Search the car," the first officer ordered. David's fists curled. "They have no warrant. No cause. No reason to do this." He turned his head slightly, his hazel eyes locking onto the officer's pale blue ones. "This stop is illegal." The words hung in the air, heavy and unmoving. For a split second, the officer hesitated, as if he wasn't used to his victims knowing their rights. Then, his sneer deepened. "That's cute," he spat. "You think your fancy FBI badge makes you untouchable?" David barely had time to register the shift before the first blow landed. A baton slammed against the back of his knee, and pain shot up his leg like a lightning bolt. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out, refusing to give them that satisfaction. Then, a second blow. His ribs. The wind rushed out of him, his hands gripping the hood of the car to stay upright. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the faint sound of an approaching vehicle. Headlights flared in the distance. For the first time since those red and blue lights flashed behind him, David felt something close to hope. But he also knew this wasn't over. David Cole fought to stay standing. His ribs burned from the baton strike. His knee throbbed, threatening to buckle. The rough Texas heat pressed down on him, thick and heavy, making it harder to breathe. But he wouldn't break. The two officers, Rollins, the one who had stopped him, and his partner, Carter, stood close, their expressions smug as David struggled to catch his breath. They had what they wanted. They had power. Control. But it wasn't enough. Now, they needed a story. A lie to justify their abuse. Carter leaned against the patrol car, his nightstick resting lazily against his shoulder. "He's resisting, Rollins," he said, his voice thick with amusement. Resisting? David could barely breathe, let alone fight back. He had complied with every order, kept his hands visible, moved slowly, but none of it mattered. This was about painting him as the villain. Rollins nodded, his lips curling into a slow smirk. "Yeah," he muttered, loud enough for his body camera to pick up. "I told him to step out, but he lunged at me. Took a swing." David's head snapped up. "That's a lie." Rollins didn't even look at him. Instead, he pulled his radio from his belt, pressing the button. "Dispatch, we got a situation here," he said, his voice suddenly breathless, acting. "Suspect became aggressive during the stop, took a swing at me. Got him restrained now, but we need backup." David's stomach dropped. He wasn't an FBI director right now. He wasn't even a man with rights. He was just a suspect. And suspects don't get the benefit of the doubt. Carter gave him a mocking look as the radio crackled back. "Copy that, Officer Rollins. Backup en route." David forced his breathing to stay steady. He had to think. He had been in high-pressure situations before, raids, interrogations, standoffs with criminals. But this was worse. Because in those moments, he had always been the one wearing the badge. Now, that badge meant nothing. "You can't do this," he said, his voice tight but controlled. "I didn't attack you. The dashcam will prove it." Carter laughed, shaking his head like David was a naive fool. "Dashcam's already covered, federal glitchy old thing. Cuts in and out all the time. Too bad it'll only pick up the part where you lunged." David clenched his jaw. They had planned this. Not him, specifically, but someone like him. A man alone on a deserted highway. A man they could twist into whatever threat they needed. He heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. Backup. More officers. More men like Rollins and Carter. Men who had already made up their minds about who David Cole was. Carter leaned in, his voice low. Here's how this goes, Federal. You either shut your mouth, let us process you nice and easy, or we find something in that fancy car of yours that puts you away for good. David's breath hitched. There it was. The real threat. The false accusations weren't just about the attack anymore. They were setting the stage for something bigger. Rollins circled the car, yanking open the back door. Looks like he's been moving fast, he called out, loud enough for the radio to hear. Could be carrying. Carrying. The coded word for drugs. David's pulse roared in his ears. His car was clean. He had never touched so much as a cigarette, let alone anything illegal. But facts didn't matter when men like Rollins held the power. Carter grabbed his arm, twisting it sharply behind his back. David gritted his teeth against the pain. Let's take a look, Carter muttered. David watched helplessly as Rollins leaned into the sedan, rummaging through the glove compartment under the seats. He took his time, making a show of it. Then, Rollins whistled. Well, he drawled. Look what we got here. David knew before he even saw it. Rollins turned, holding up a small plastic bag, one filled with a white, powdery substance. Cocaine. David's entire body went numb. It wasn't his. It had never been there. But now it was the only thing anyone would see. Carter let out a low whistle. Damn, Fed, he said, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Looks like you're in the wrong line of work. David stared at the bag, his mind racing. They had planned this. Not because he was David Cole, FBI director, but because he was a black man behind the wheel of a nice car. Because they knew no one would question their word over his. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flickering against the night sky. More officers. More false reports. More layers to a story that would paint him as just another criminal. David took a slow breath. He was being framed. But he also knew something else. He wasn't going down without a fight. David Cole sat in the back of the patrol car, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back, wrists burning from the metal biting into his skin. The seat was stiff, the air thick with the stench of sweat and cigarette smoke. Through the grimy window, he could see Officer Jack Rollins and his partner, Carter, standing by his silver sedan, speaking in low voices, occasionally glancing back at him. He knew what they were doing. They weren't talking about procedure. They weren't reviewing facts. They were building a story. The radio crackled as Rollins leaned against his squad car, phone in one hand, thumb moving quickly across the screen. David couldn't hear what he was saying, but he didn't have to. He had seen it before, too many times. Footage disappears. Evidence is lost. The truth bends when the right people control the narrative. Carter stood by the dashboard computer, smirking. This thing's been acting up all week, he muttered, shaking his head. His voice was loud enough for David to hear. It wasn't an explanation. It was a script. Rollins chuckled. Yeah, damn thing cuts out at the worst times. David clenched his jaw. They were preparing. If anyone asked why the full dashcam footage didn't match their report, they'd already have their excuse. The first real lie came next. Rollins pressed the button on his radio, his voice shifting to something urgent. Yeah, we got a situation here. Suspect became aggressive during the stop, took a swing at me when I asked for ID. David's head snapped up. His pulse pounded in his ears. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved quickly. He had done everything right. But it didn't matter. Then he went for my weapon, Rollins continued. David's chest tightened. That was the lie that could end him. They weren't just framing him for resisting. They were laying the foundation for something worse. Those words had been used to justify everything from beatings to bullets. Rollins was creating a reason, just in case anyone asked why the officers had used force, why the injuries on David's body existed at all. Inside the patrol car, Carter was typing. The faint glow of the screen illuminated his face in the dark. He wasn't just filing a report. He was editing history. David knew what the dashcam footage would look like once they were done with it. The beginning would be cut, removing the part where David calmly asked why he was being pulled over. The moments where he complied, moving slowly and carefully, wouldn't make the final version. Instead, the footage would jump straight to him stepping out of the car. The angle would be tilted just enough to make it look like a lunge. They would mute the audio at just the right time, so no one would hear Rollins calling him boy. No one would hear Carter laughing about finding something in the car. When it aired, people wouldn't see the bat and strike that had knocked him to his knees. They wouldn't hear the officers cursing at him, kicking his legs apart, wrenching his arms behind his back. Instead, they would see him on the ground, struggling, his face twisted in pain. They would take that image and turn it into proof that he was dangerous. David swallowed the rage burning in his throat. This wasn't about him personally. It was about power. It was about making sure no one would believe his side of the story. Rollins pulled out a cigarette, lighting it with slow ease as he watched the highway stretch dark and empty before them. He was waiting. It was only a matter of time before someone from the department called, offering reassurance that they had his back. David had seen it happen before. They would release the video before he even got the chance to defend himself. By morning, the news stations would already have it, chopped and edited to fit the story the officers had written tonight. The headlines would scroll across the screen. FBI agent attacks officer during routine traffic stop. Federal agent goes for officer's gun. Who's really the criminal here? And people would believe it. They always did. They would see the footage, hear the officers' voices, and decide in an instant that David was just another angry black man who had stepped out of line. David stared out the window, his jaw locked. He had spent his entire career fighting for justice, upholding the law, believing in the system. But now, sitting in the back of a police car, falsely accused and powerless, he realized something chilling. The truth didn't matter. Only the story they could sell. The sirens in the distance grew louder, red and blue lights flickering against the night sky. Backup was coming. More officers. More reports. More layers of the lie that would follow him for the rest of his life. But they had underestimated him. David Cole wasn't just another victim. He knew how this worked. And he wasn't going down without a fight. The first time David saw the video, he was sitting in a holding cell. His face still ached from where Rollins had slammed him against the patrol car, and his ribs throbbed with each slow breath. His hands, now uncuffed, rested on his lap, but the sting of the too-tight metal still lingered on his wrists. The cold bench beneath him felt harder than stone, and the air smelled of sweat, disinfectant, and stale coffee. He wasn't supposed to see it this way. He should have been in his home by now, his suit jacket neatly hung in the closet, his son asleep upstairs, his wife waiting to hear about his day. Instead, he sat under the harsh fluorescent lights of a detention center, staring at a grainy video playing on an officer's phone just beyond the bars. Rollins was outside the cell, grinning as he turned the volume up. "You're famous, Federal." The video was barely 30 seconds long, but that was all it took. A chopped, distorted version of the truth. The footage had been edited, trimmed down, and manipulated to show exactly what the officers wanted the world to see. The clip started midway through the stop, David stepping out of his car. But in this version, the crucial context was missing. Gone was Rollins' aggressive tone. Gone was the bat and strike to his leg, the violent shove against the hood. Instead, the video made it look as if David had moved too quickly, as if he had lunged forward. The cut was jarring, fast, a trick of editing to turn an innocent moment into something sinister. Then came the worst part. A dubbed-in voice, one that wasn't his, shouted angrily, "I'll kill you, pig." David's breath caught. They had added fake audio. His heart pounded as he listened, trying to convince himself that his ears were deceiving him. But the words were clear, sharp, aggressive, and they had never left his mouth. Rollins chuckled. Amazing what you can do with a little tech these days. David's stomach turned as the clip continued. The frame shook as if he had made some sudden, dangerous movement. And then, the final shot, David on the ground, face twisted in pain, one officer pinning him down. The way it was edited, the way it was framed, it looked like self-defense on the officer's part. The caption beneath the video read, "FBI agent assaults officer during routine stop, needs to be fired immediately." David clenched his fists. This wasn't just a lie, it was a weapon. The video was already spreading. He could see the notifications piling up on Rollins' phone, the numbers climbing as more people shared, more people watched, more people believed. Rollins tapped the screen and smirked. 50,000 views already. People love a good story, don't they? A deep, burning anger settled in David's chest. He knew how these things worked. By morning, the clip would be on national news. It would be shared on social media by thousands, maybe millions, of people who didn't know him, didn't care about the truth, and had already decided he was guilty. He could already hear the headlines. Dangerous FBI thug thinks he's above the law. When even the feds attack police, who can we trust? Blue lives matter, get this criminal off our streets. The comments would be worse. They would call him every slur in the book. They would bring up his race, his career, his past, twisting it all into something ugly, something dangerous. People who had once called him a respected agent, a man of integrity, would suddenly see him as a thug. His name, his legacy, his years of service, all erased in seconds by a manufactured lie. The weight of it all settled on him like a stone. It wasn't just about what people believed, it was about what would come next. Would he lose his job? His reputation? His future? What about his family? Would his wife and son be targeted because of this? Would they be harassed? Threatened? A fresh wave of dread rolled over him as he imagined his son, Jordan, sitting at the breakfast table, seeing his father's face on the news, twisted into a criminal. Would he still look at him the same way? Would he still see his father as a hero? David squeezed his eyes shut, willing the thought away. But the damage had already been done. Rollins exhaled loudly, clearly enjoying himself. "Well, Fed, looks like the court of public opinion just ruled against you." He leaned against the bars, voice dripping with amusement. "And you know the best part? It doesn't even matter if you're innocent. That video's out there forever. No one's gonna listen to your side of the story." David knew he was right. That was the power of a well-placed lie. By the time the truth caught up, the damage would already be done. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do to stop it. David Cole sat in the holding cell, his fingers pressed against his temples, his breath slow and steady even as his mind raced. He had been in tense situations before, had faced down cartel bosses, corrupt politicians, and hardened criminals, but this was different. This time, he was the one in the cage. The viral video had already spread. He hadn't even been given a phone call before the damage was done. He had seen it on the officer's phone, heard Rollins and Carter laughing about how quickly people had bought the lie. They weren't even being subtle. They didn't have to be. David had spent his entire life believing in justice, believing in the law, but now, as he sat on the cold metal bench, the truth settled into his bones like a sickness. This wasn't just a bad traffic stop. This wasn't just a few rogue officers. This was a setup. The realization hit him in slow waves, each one crashing heavier than the last. If it had just been a routine stop gone wrong, Rollins and Carter would have made their excuses, written a false report, and let it die in a pile of paperwork like so many others. But they didn't. They had a plan. They had a story ready before he even opened his mouth. The doctored video hadn't been thrown together sloppily, it had been calculated. The audio, the edits, the timing, it had all been prepared as if someone had been waiting for this moment, as if he had been a target long before those lights flashed in his rearview mirror. David's heart pounded in his chest. If this was a setup, then it wasn't just about him. It was about who he was. A black man in power. An FBI director in Houston. A man who had spent years taking down drug rings, exposing corrupt politicians, cleaning up police departments. He had made enemies. And now, it seemed, those enemies had decided to strike back. He ran through the possibilities in his mind, piecing it together like a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces for yet. Rollins and Carter were small-time cops, but their confidence, the way they didn't even try to hide their corruption, meant they had protection. Someone higher up had their backs. The fake charges, the false video, the instant media push, all of it meant that this wasn't just about making him suffer. It was about erasing him, ruining his name, destroying everything he had built. David took a slow, steady breath and forced himself to think like an investigator, not a victim. The people behind this had resources. They had connections in the media. They had a system in place to turn him into the villain before he even had a chance to speak. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a takedown. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated him. David wasn't just any man. He wasn't some helpless civilian they could frame and discard. He knew how the system worked, and he knew how to fight back. He glanced toward the bars, his mind already shifting from shock to strategy. If they thought they could bury him, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The night stretched dark and empty around him, the endless Texas highway disappearing into shadows beyond the reach of his headlights. David Cole's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, his pulse steady, but his mind racing. He had just escaped one trap, but he wasn't safe yet. He could still hear the echo of Rollins' laughter, the cocky certainty in his voice when he played that doctored video in the holding cell. The message had been clear. They weren't just trying to arrest him. They were trying to erase him. Now, as he sped down Highway 80, he kept checking his mirrors, scanning the empty road for what he knew would come next. They weren't going to let him get away. Then he saw them. Headlights. Far behind him at first, but moving fast. Too fast. David's chest tightened. He knew these roads. There was no reason for a convoy of trucks to be pushing over 80 miles per hour down a desolate stretch of highway at this hour. It was them. The same people who had been flooding the comments section of that viral video, spitting hate, calling for justice, their kind of justice. They had seen the clip, swallowed the lie whole, and now they were here to deliver their verdict. The first truck came up hard, its high beams flooding his mirror, making it impossible to see anything behind it. David gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to speed up. That was what they wanted. They wanted him to run, to look guilty, to justify whatever they were about to do. He kept his speed steady, gripping the wheel as another truck swerved into the next lane, trying to box him in. The bridge was coming. A narrow, steel truss structure stretching over a dry riverbed, the kind of place where accidents happened and no one asked too many questions. David's breath came slow and even, his training kicking in. He wasn't just an FBI agent. He had worked cases on white supremacist militias, extremist groups, men who lived for moments like this. He knew how they thought. And right now, they weren't thinking about the law. They were thinking about making him disappear. The second truck lurched closer, its tires screaming against the asphalt as it tried to shove him toward the shoulder. David jerked the wheel, keeping control, but he could feel the road narrowing beneath him. The bridge loomed ahead, its skeletal frame cutting against the night sky. No streetlights. No cameras. A perfect place for a so-called accident. A third vehicle, a rusted-out pickup with a Confederate flag snapping in the wind, roared up behind him, its driver leaning out the window, shouting something that got lost in the roar of engines. David didn't need to hear the words to know what they meant. He had been hearing them his whole life. Another hard shove came from his right. This time, the impact slammed his shoulder into the door, the force nearly sending him skidding into the guardrail. His tires screamed, the bridge just seconds away. He had two choices: let them push him over, or make a move before they could. David's fingers flexed on the wheel. Not tonight. He slammed the brakes. The sudden deceleration threw off the trucks boxing him in. The one on his right shot forward, its driver overcorrecting in surprise. David didn't wait. He yanked the wheel left, threading the gap between the other two vehicles before they could close in again. His tires hit the entrance to the bridge, the metal grating vibrating beneath him as the first truck swerved back toward him. Then, a shattering explosion of glass. A brick smashed through his windshield. David ducked on instinct, the jagged shards slicing across his cheek as the brick thudded into the passenger seat. A voice, loud, slurred with hate, shouted, "Get out, you black bastard!" David didn't blink. Didn't react. That was what they wanted. His focus locked on the road. The bridge stretched ahead, a tight corridor of steel beams and worn asphalt. He had seconds before they would try again. Another truck sped alongside him, its driver now holding a shotgun, the barrel flashing under the moonlight. David gritted his teeth. They were willing to kill him. And no one would question it. The video had done its job. To the world, he was already a criminal. A thug in a suit. A man who had attacked officers. If his car tumbled over the side, if his body was found in the dry riverbed below, they'd say he was fleeing arrest. They'd say it was his fault. They'd say a lot of things. David swerved. Not away, toward the truck. The driver, startled, jerked the wheel just as the bridge narrowed, his bumper scraping hard against the guardrail. Metal screamed. Tires shredded. The truck fishtailed, and for a split second, David saw the man's face. Shock. Fear. Like he hadn't expected a black man to fight back. The truck slammed into the guardrail one last time and went over. David didn't watch it fall. He couldn't. The second truck was already coming up behind him, its grille inches from his rear bumper. He gunned the engine. The sedan shot forward, tires screaming as he cleared the bridge, his mirrors filled with the chaos behind him. One truck down. The others slowing. Uncertain. They hadn't planned for this. David exhaled, his body vibrating with adrenaline, his face stinging from the glass, his hand steady on the wheel. They had tried to kill him. And they had failed. But they wouldn't stop. Not now. Not after this. David checked his gas gauge. Half a tank. Enough to reach Houston. Enough to get somewhere safe, if such a place even existed for him anymore. The rules had changed. He wasn't just running for his life now. He was fighting for it. The brick came out of nowhere. David Cole barely had time to react before the windshield shattered inward, glass exploding across the dashboard, tiny shards stinging his skin. His hand stayed tight on the wheel, knuckles white as he fought the instinct to jerk the car. A wrong move now, 1 second of panic, and he'd lose control. The brick landed hard in the passenger seat, bouncing against the worn leather before settling in the floorboard, a crude weapon meant to end him. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. His foot hovered over the brake, but he didn't press down. He knew better. Stopping meant death. Through the fractured windshield, he could barely see the road. Dust swirled in the air. The truck still flanked him, their high beams flashing, illuminating the glass dust floating in the cabin like stars. A voice carried over the roar of engines. A hard, hate-filled bellow from one of the men in the convoy chasing him. "Get out of the car, boy." David didn't even flinch. Another truck swerved closer, its rusted grille inches from his driver's side door. The passenger inside, a heavy-set man in a hunting jacket, was leaning out the window, something thick and wooden in his hands. David didn't recognize it at first. Then he saw the nails. It was a bat. His gut clenched. They weren't just trying to scare him off the road. They were trying to drag him out of his car. The man raised the bat, ready to swing, aiming for David's side window. David made his move. He wrenched the wheel hard to the right, cutting toward the truck at the last second, forcing the driver to swerve or take the hit. The truck veered wildly, the bat-wielding man scrambling to stay inside, his arms flailing as the door nearly swung open. It bought David 2 seconds. Not enough to escape, but enough to think. He blinked hard, clearing the sting of glass from his eyes. Blood trickled down his cheek from a shallow cut just below his temple. His mind raced, cataloging his options. The brick had been the first warning shot. The bat had been the second. The third would be the one that killed him. He needed to act now. Up ahead, the road narrowed, a steep embankment on one side, a low concrete barrier on the other. Beyond that, nothing but a 40-foot drop into dry brush. A wrong move would send him flying into the canyon below. David eased his grip on the wheel just slightly, letting the car drift toward the barrier, making it look like he was losing control. He could feel their eyes on him, watching, waiting for the moment he broke. The truck on his left sped up, trying to cut him off completely, forcing him toward the edge. The driver, a younger man, maybe mid-20s, blonde hair peeking from beneath a ball cap, grinned as he inched closer. David let him come. Just a little more. The truck's fender clipped his rear bumper. The impact sent a violent jolt through the sedan, but David was ready. He gritted his teeth and hit the brakes, not enough to stop, but enough to throw the timing off. The truck beside him, moving too fast, too confident in the kill, overshot the turn. Its tires caught loose gravel, sending it skidding sideways. For a split second, David saw the driver's face twist into panic. Then the truck slammed into the barrier. It hit at a bad angle, the back end whipping around from the force of the impact. David didn't watch what happened next. He didn't have to. In his rearview mirror, he saw the red taillights tilt, twist, then vanish. A deep, guttural crunch of metal followed. Then nothing. No explosion. No screams. Just silence. David exhaled sharply, a quick, shaky breath. One down. But there were more. The remaining 2 trucks hesitated for the first time. They had expected a hunt, not a fight. David wiped the blood from his cheek, his hazel eyes sharp, locked on the road ahead. His sedan was damaged, the shattered windshield made visibility a nightmare, but it was still running. And so was he. He wasn't a victim. And if these men thought they could chase him into the dark and erase him from existence, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. David could still hear the sound of the truck crashing into the ravine behind him, metal twisting and crumpling into the dry earth below. But he didn't have time to look back. The other trucks were still there, their headlights blazing in his rearview mirror, their engines roaring as they adjusted their positions, deciding what to do next. He had bought himself a moment, but that's all it was. A moment. His breath was steady, controlled, but his heart hammered in his chest. The sting of blood trickling from the cut on his forehead, the sharp ache in his ribs from the hit he'd taken earlier, it was all background noise now. What mattered was getting out of here alive. Up ahead, the highway stretched dark and empty. The next town was at least 30 miles away, and there wouldn't be a gas station or even a porch light before then. The desert was nothing but open land, a place where men disappeared if the wrong people wanted them to. And that was exactly what these men wanted. David knew what this was now. It wasn't just rage over the video. It wasn't a handful of drunk men out looking for trouble. This was a hunt. The realization settled in his gut like ice. The doctored footage had done its job. It had turned him into a target, not just for corrupt cops, but for the kind of men who saw themselves as judge, jury, and executioner. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't care that he had spent 2 decades upholding the law. All they saw was the narrative they had been fed, a dangerous black man, a threat in a suit, someone who needed to be taught a lesson. The truck closest to him revved its engine, trying to intimidate him, waiting to see if he would panic, make a mistake. David gave them nothing. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, blinking hard through the fractured windshield, his mind working fast. He didn't have the luxury of calling for backup. His phone had been taken at the precinct, and even if he had one, who would he call? Local law enforcement? That was a joke. They were the ones who had started this. He needed to get off the road, disappear long enough to figure out his next move. A mile ahead, the highway curved slightly to the right, the landscape opening into rolling desert hills and scattered brush. A small service road split off to the left, barely visible in the darkness. It was a gamble, but right now, it was his only shot. He slowed just slightly, not enough to make them suspicious, just enough to time his move. Then, at the last second, he yanked the wheel left, tires screeching as he veered onto the service road. The dust cloud kicked up behind him, swallowing his taillights. For the first time since this nightmare began, David disappeared into the night. David Cole pulled into the police precinct parking lot, his sedan barely holding together after the high-speed chase and the shattered windshield from the brick attack. His breath was steady, but his body felt like it had been through a war. His ribs throbbed, his temple was crusted with dried blood, and his hands, still gripping the wheel, were tight with the weight of everything that had happened in the last few hours. This was his last option. He had spent years working with law enforcement, coordinating operations between local police and the FBI. He had earned respect, built relationships. If there was any shred of integrity left in this town's department, he could find it here. David pushed open the car door and stepped into the stale, humid night air. The lot was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional crackle of a dispatcher's voice from a nearby squad car's radio. He limped toward the front doors, ignoring the sharp pain in his side. Inside, the precinct smelled of coffee gone stale and old sweat. A young officer behind the front desk barely looked up, his fingers tapping lazily at the keyboard. David pulled in a breath and forced his voice to stay calm, authoritative, the voice of a man who had spent decades commanding a room. "I need to speak to the watch commander. Now." The officer finally looked up, his eyes scanning David's torn suit, his blood-stained shirt, the way he held himself upright despite the obvious pain. Something flickered across his face, recognition. He knows who I am. But instead of concern, there was something else. Something colder. "You're in the wrong place, Fed," the officer muttered, his voice dripping with indifference. "Should have called ahead." David's stomach tightened. Something was wrong. A door behind the desk swung open, and two officers stepped out. Sergeant Grayson and Officer Tom Burke. David knew them. He had worked cases with them before, met them in joint task force meetings. But the moment their eyes landed on him, he knew. They weren't here to help. Burke smirked. "Well, look what we got here. Thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now, Cole." David squared his shoulders. "I need a secure line. Now. I need to call my deputy director." Grayson let out a slow chuckle. "See, that's the thing. We already got a call about you. Said you assaulted an officer. Fled the scene. Sounds real bad." David took a step back, but Burke was already circling behind him. He felt it in the air, the way they had been waiting for him, the way their hands twitched toward their batons, their holsters. This wasn't just a failure of justice. This was an ambush. David moved first. He lunged to the side, knocking over a metal chair and shoving past Grayson. He had one chance, get to the door, get out. But Burke was faster than he looked. A baton slammed into the back of David's knee, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded up his leg, but he forced himself to roll, swinging his arm up just in time to block another strike aimed for his ribs. Grayson crouched beside him, gripping his collar, yanking him up just enough to get in his face. "You think that badge makes you untouchable," he hissed. "You ain't special, Cole." Then the next hit came, hard and fast, a baton to his stomach. David doubled over, the breath ripped from his lungs. Burke grabbed him by the back of his jacket and dragged him across the floor, his shoes scraping against the tile. Somewhere, the young officer at the desk laughed. David tried to push himself up, but a boot pressed into his shoulder, pinning him down. "You were supposed to take your beating back on that highway," Burke muttered, leaning in close. "But you had to go and make it a whole damn spectacle, didn't you?" David coughed, tasting copper in his mouth. He could hear voices in the distance, other officers, maybe a dispatcher, but no one was stopping this. No one cared. Because this had never been about justice. This had been planned. Burke dropped to a crouch, his baton tapping lightly against David's shoulder. "You know how this ends, right?" he murmured. "You ain't walking out of here clean. Hell, you might not walk out at all." David closed his eyes for half a second, forcing the pain down, forcing his thoughts to sharpen. He had fought too long, too hard, to let them bury him here. He had to find a way out. Because if he didn't, they were going to make sure he never saw the light of day again. David Cole lay on the cold tile floor of the precinct, his body aching from the latest round of beatings. His ribs throbbed, his vision blurred at the edges, and the taste of blood lingered in his mouth. Every breath felt like dragging a knife across his lungs, but he refused to let them see weakness. The laughter of the officers echoed through the room, their voices smug, their confidence unwavering. "You should have stayed down," Sergeant Grayson muttered, crouching beside David. "Would have made this easier for you." David clenched his jaw, his mind sharpening through the pain. This wasn't about just hurting him. It was about destroying him completely. And that meant the next move wasn't going to be physical. It was going to be legal. Burke leaned against the desk, cracking his knuckles. "Gotta admit, Fed, you had us worried for a second. Thought you might actually slip through the cracks." David didn't answer. Burke didn't need him to. He was enjoying this too much. Now, we could have kept it simple. Resisting arrest, a little assault charge, but after that mess you caused on the highway? Nah. You need something bigger. David lifted his head, his hazel eyes locking onto Burke's. "False charges won't stick." His voice was hoarse, but steady. Burke grinned. "Who's gonna say they're false?" Grayson straightened, rolling his shoulders like a man preparing for a long shift. "See, we already got the narrative started. That video did half the work for us. But folks don't just want to see you taken down, they want to see you buried." David stayed silent, waiting. That was when Officer Rollins walked in. His uniform was neat, his badge polished, but his expression was one of pure, unchecked arrogance. Well, look who decided to show up at our doorstep," Rollins drawled, stopping just a few feet away from David. "You must be dumber than I thought. Walking in here, thinking you could just clear things up." David knew what was coming before Rollins even opened his mouth again. "We found drugs in your car," he said, his voice mockingly casual. David felt his pulse slow, his mind working through the implications. They had planted it. Of course they had. And now, they were going to make sure it was the first thing every news station reported. "Full kilo," Burke chimed in, shaking his head like he was disappointed. "Real shame. Looks like you've been running some side business, huh? Director of the Houston FBI, trafficking narcotics, now that's a headline." David didn't react. They were waiting for him to lash out, to give them an excuse to hit him again. Instead, he breathed in slowly, keeping his face unreadable. "You really think people are gonna believe that?" he asked, his voice cold. Rollins laughed. "Oh, they already do." He tapped his phone screen, flipping it around to show a breaking news alert flashing across the screen. "FBI agent in custody after drug bust, shocking new evidence emerges." David's stomach twisted, but his face remained impassive. It was happening in real time. They had leaked the charges before he even knew about them. "See, that's the thing," Rollins continued, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Public's already made up their minds. Doesn't matter if you fight it. Hell, even if the drugs disappear from evidence, people just say the FBI covered for you. David knew he was right. That was the power of a well-placed lie. Once the idea was out there, it didn't need proof. People believed what they wanted to believe. Burke sighed, shaking his head like a man pretending to be regretful. Drugs, violence against police, resisting arrest, might even have to toss in some weapons charges, just to be safe. Grayson nodded. Got some old evidence we can find in your house. Maybe a gun tied to some case files. David felt his jaw tighten. They had covered all their bases. They weren't just fabricating a crime. They were rewriting his entire existence. He wasn't going to be remembered as an FBI agent, a husband, a father. He was going to be the dirty cop, the criminal mastermind, the villain. And that's exactly what they wanted. Because once the world saw him that way, no one would question why he didn't make it out of jail alive. Rollins clapped his hands together. Now, I think we're just about ready to book you, Federal. He motioned to the door. Let's get those mugshots done, press lead him up. David didn't move. His mind was working, calculating, searching for a way out. He had one chance left. And if he didn't take it now, he'd never see daylight again. David Cole could feel the shift in the air before he even heard the words. Standing in the dimly lit holding cell, his ribs aching from the earlier beating, his wrists raw from the cuffs that had been on too tight for too long, he watched as Sergeant Grayson strolled in, rolling up his sleeves like a man getting ready to do a little cleanup work. The room was silent except for the slow tap of Grayson's boots against the concrete floor. He stopped just outside the bars, pulling out his phone, glancing at the screen before shaking his head with a grin. Well, Fed, he said, his voice thick with satisfaction, it's official. You're a fugitive now. David barely blinked, but he felt the full weight of what had just been said. Fugitive. It didn't matter that he was standing right there in a police station, that he had walked into this precinct looking for help. They had rewritten the story. You're lying, David said, keeping his voice even, controlled. Grayson chuckled and turned his phone around, flashing the screen so David could see the breaking news banner across the top. Nationwide manhunt underway for FBI agent turned criminal. David's breath slowed as his eyes skimmed the headline. Below it, his own face stared back at him, a mugshot hastily taken at the station, his bruised jaw and bloody temple making him look every bit the part of a dangerous man on the run. His heart pounded against his ribs, but not from fear, from fury. They had planned this. Every single part of it. First, the doctored video, making it look like he had attacked those officers. Then the fake drug charges, the planted evidence, the carefully crafted leaks to the press. And now, the final nail in the coffin. He wasn't just a disgraced FBI agent anymore. He was a wanted man. Burke strolled in behind Grayson, yawning like this was nothing more than a boring shift at work. They just put out the bolo, he said lazily. Armed and dangerous. Shoot on sight. David forced himself to stay still. If he showed even the slightest reaction, they would enjoy it too much. Grayson smirked. Hell, even if we let you walk out that door right now, you wouldn't make it 2 miles. Whole damn state's looking for you. And you know how these small-town boys are. They'd love to be the one to take down the rogue FBI agent. Burke shook his head in mock sympathy. Damn shame, really. Maybe if you hadn't made such a mess out there, you could have cut a deal. But now? He whistled low, shaking his head. You're done, Cole. David exhaled slowly. He had spent years in law enforcement. He had built cases against criminals who thought they were untouchable. He had watched men in high positions fall when they finally ran out of places to hide. But this wasn't just corruption. This was something deeper. Something rotten at the core of the system itself. He wasn't facing a few dirty cops. He was up against an entire machine designed to destroy him. And if he didn't get out of there tonight, they were going to finish the job. Burke cracked his knuckles. I mean, we could do you a favor, he mused. Keep you locked up here for a little while. Make sure no one gets too trigger-happy before trial." Grayson scoffed. "Please. You think this guy's ever making it to trial?" The words settled in the room like the final sentence in an execution order. David took a slow, deliberate breath, his mind running through every possible escape route. He had spent his life surviving in situations just as deadly as this. And if they thought they had already won, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The night was quiet in the Cole household. Sarah Cole stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing off the last of the dinner dishes. The house was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustling of leaves outside. It had been an exhausting day, made even heavier by the endless stream of news flashing across her phone. She had seen the headlines. She had seen David's face plastered on the screen, his name being dragged through the mud. She didn't believe a word of it. Her husband was a good man. A man who had spent his whole life fighting for justice, not running from it. She didn't care what the news said. She didn't care how much the reporters spun their stories. She knew him. She knew his heart. But deep down, she also knew something else. The people coming after him wouldn't stop. And now, they were coming after her. The first sign was the headlights. Bright, blinding, flooding the driveway like stage lights on a final act. Then came the sound, tires screeching, doors slamming, boots crunching against the pavement. Sarah barely had time to dry her hands before a thunderous pounding rattled the front door. "FBI. Open up." Her breath caught. She turned toward the staircase. "Jordan," she called, her voice tight. "Stay in your room." Her 12-year-old son's footsteps were already racing down the hall. "Mom? What's happening?" Another pounding at the door, this time more violent. "Sarah Cole, we have a warrant for your arrest." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had done nothing wrong. She knew that. They knew that. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about the truth. This was about silencing her husband. She took a step toward the door just as it burst open, splinters flying as armed officers flooded inside. Guns drawn. Tactical vests on. Like they were storming a drug den instead of a suburban home. "Hands up. Now." Sarah's entire body shook, but she raised her hand slowly, her breath shallow. "I have a child in the house," she managed, her voice strained. "Please." They didn't listen. Rough hands grabbed her, yanking her forward, twisting her arms behind her back. Cold metal clamped around her wrists, handcuffs. "Mom." Jordan's voice sliced through the chaos. Sarah struggled, trying to turn, but an officer shoved her forward, keeping her from seeing her son. "Stay in your room, Jordan," she shouted. "Don't." But it was too late. Another officer had already grabbed him. Jordan yelped as he was hauled forward, his small arms wrenched behind his back. Sarah fought harder. "He's a child. Let him go. He's under arrest." Sarah's stomach dropped. They weren't just coming after her. They were taking her son, too. "For what?" she cried. "He's 12. The officer didn't even hesitate. "Conspiracy to obstruct justice." Sarah felt the room spin. Her vision blurred, a mix of rage and terror flooding her veins. "You're arresting a child," she demanded, her voice cracking. "Are you insane?" But the officers didn't respond. They had their orders. Sarah and Jordan were dragged out of their home, their neighbors peeking from windows, their phones raised, recording the moment but doing nothing to stop it. The night air was sharp against Sarah's skin as the flashing lights of black SUVs lit up the front yard. She could hear Jordan crying, but she couldn't reach him. A news van sat at the end of the block. The media was already there. They wanted footage. They wanted a story. And they had one now, the family of a fugitive, caught in the middle of his crimes. Sarah knew then what this was. This wasn't an arrest. This was a message. and it was meant for David. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the quiet suburban street, casting harsh shadows against the neatly trimmed lawns and parked cars. Sarah Cole stood frozen on the front porch, her wrists locked in cold steel cuffs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear her son's muffled sobs from inside the police cruiser parked at the curb, his voice barely carrying over the shouts and heavy boots storming through their home. Sarah had always known that David's job came with risks. But she had never imagined this, being dragged from her home in front of neighbors who once waved at her in the mornings, their faces now pressed against windows, watching as if she had suddenly become a criminal. The front door had been left wide open. From where she stood, she could see officers tearing through their belongings, rifling through drawers, pulling books from shelves, flipping over cushions, and dumping out closets. They weren't looking for anything. They were placing something. Sarah had heard the stories before: corrupt cops, planted evidence, lives ruined with just a few ounces of powder tucked into the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, she was living it. A stocky officer with graying hair and a smirk that barely hid his satisfaction walked out of the house, holding up a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. He dangled it between his fingers like a trophy. Well, he said, shaking his head as he turned toward the nearest camera, the one from the news van conveniently stationed at the edge of the street. Looks like we got ourselves a little drug operation right here in the heart of suburbia. Sarah's stomach turned. That's not ours, she shouted, her voice raw. You planted that. But the moment the words left her lips, she knew how it would look. The officer turned toward her, still smirking. That's what they all say. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. You're lying. Am I? The officer raised an eyebrow, then turned to one of his subordinates. What do you think? That look like cartel weight to you? The other cop, a younger man, barely 30, nodded, his expression blank. Definitely enough to distribute. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. They were setting up not just David, but their whole family. They weren't just painting David as a rogue agent. They were making sure his wife and child became criminals too. A female officer, younger, dark-haired, pulled into a tight ponytail, walked out next, holding a gun wrapped in an evidence bag. Sarah knew that gun. It had been locked in a safe in their bedroom, a safe David had kept secured since the day he became an agent. Her voice shook. That wasn't a locked case. The officer shrugged. Guess you forgot to lock it this time. Another officer pretended to scribble notes onto a report, then spoke loud enough for the cameras to hear. Illegal firearms. Narcotics. Looks like Mr. Cole's been hiding a lot more than we thought. Sarah couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Her house, the home she had built with David, where they had raised their son, where they had lived as a normal family despite the dangers of his job, was being turned into a crime scene before her very eyes. And no one was stopping it. Sarah turned, desperate now, searching the crowd of neighbors standing in their driveways, hoping someone would say something, do something. But they just stared, silent. She saw a woman she had shared coffee with just last week, a man who had helped fix their fence last summer. People who had once smiled at her at grocery stores, waved as they walked their dogs past her house. Now, they watched her like a stranger. Like a criminal. Sarah felt her knees buckle. She had spent her whole life doing everything right. Following the rules. Paying her bills on time. Teaching Jordan to be respectful. And none of it mattered. Because the moment the police decided she was guilty, the world agreed. The officer with the graying hair turned back to the camera, shifting his stance just enough to make sure the media got a good shot of him holding up the bag of drugs. Well, he said, his voice rich with mock sympathy, guess this explains why her husband ran, huh? Sarah's blood turned to ice. That was the story they were spinning now. David wasn't just a fugitive anymore. He was a drug dealer. A criminal. A man who had left his family behind to take the fall. A breath shuddered through her, and she forced herself to stand up straight, to meet the officer's eyes without a single hint of the fear curling in her stomach. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice quiet, but strong. The officer smiled, like he had heard those words before. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear. "We already have." He nodded toward the street. The cameras. The flashing lights. The neighbors, whispering, staring. They all saw the same thing now. Not a wronged woman. Not an innocent family. But a drug lord's wife, caught at last. Sarah felt her stomach turn as she was shoved toward the police car, the doors slamming shut behind her. Her hands shook against the cuffs, but her eyes burned with something stronger than fear now. Anger. Because if these men thought she was just going to sit back and let them destroy her family, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Sarah sat in the cramped holding cell, the cold metal bench pressing against her back. Her wrists ached from the cuffs, now removed but leaving red marks where the metal had bitten into her skin. She had barely been processed before the media storm began. From the moment she and Jordan were forced into the police cruiser, she had known the cameras were rolling. Every movement, every shouted plea for her son's safety had been caught on tape. But now, as she listened to the voices filtering in from the squad room, she realized just how quickly the world outside had swallowed the lie. A TV mounted in the corner flickered with breaking news coverage. The station logo spun in the corner of the screen as a polished anchor with a practiced look of concern delivered the latest headline. The Cole family drug empire, new details emerge. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Next to the headline, her mugshot filled the screen. She looked nothing like herself. Her hair disheveled, her face pale, her eyes swollen from exhaustion and fear. Beside her picture, they had placed a photo of David, his official FBI portrait, the one where he stood strong and confident, never knowing it would be used to paint him as a fugitive instead of a protector. Sarah watched as the anchor's voice took on a grave tone. Tonight, new revelations about the criminal activities of former FBI Director David Cole. Authorities confirmed that during a raid on his family home, large quantities of narcotics and illegal firearms were recovered, raising serious concerns about how deep this conspiracy goes. The screen cut to a clip of the officer leading the raid, the same one who had smirked while holding up the bag of cocaine he had planted in her home. Now, he stood in front of microphones, his voice steady, serious, a man pretending to be the face of law and order. "We're looking at a coordinated effort to traffic drugs, to hide evidence, and possibly even assist in David Cole's escape," the officer said, his expression grave. "We have reason to believe this family was complicit in his crimes." Sarah shook her head, her nails digging into the palm of her hand. It didn't matter that she had never so much as touched a drug in her life. It didn't matter that the gun they found had been legally registered, locked away, never once used for anything outside of David's line of work. It didn't matter that Jordan was just 12 years old. The world wouldn't see a mother and child being dragged from their home. They would see criminals. The screen switched again, this time to a panel of commentators, each offering their expert opinions on her family's downfall. One of them, a retired police chief, shook his head. "This is what we see time and time again. A man like David Cole, he had everything. A career, a family, power. And what happens? He lets greed take over, gets involved in the same kind of crimes he swore to fight." Another panelist, a political analyst, nodded eagerly. "And let's talk about Sarah Cole. You don't live in the same house as an FBI agent turned drug lord and not know what's going on. She's either covering for him or she was in on it from the start." The final blow came when the screen shifted again, to a grainy, blurred clip of Jordan being pushed into the police car, his face barely visible beneath the flashing lights. The anchor sighed dramatically. And the real tragedy here, their son, just 12 years old. Now in protective custody, while his mother faces multiple felony charges. This child has lost his father to crime and his mother to the justice system. Sarah felt her chest tighten, a rage building so deep it hurt. They weren't just taking David down. They were erasing their entire family. She turned away from the screen, her hands clenched so tight she could feel her nails bite into her palms. She knew how this worked. People wouldn't wait for the truth. The comments would already be flooding in, people spewing hate, saying she deserved to rot in prison, calling Jordan a future thug, claiming David had been dirty all along. Once the lie was out there, it didn't need proof. People believed what they wanted to believe. A young officer walked past her cell, his phone buzzing with notifications. She caught a glimpse of the screen, a news app open, her mugshot staring back at her. He smirked as he put it away. Sarah exhaled slowly, forcing the rage down, pushing the fear aside. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to sit in this cell, to crumble beneath the weight of a crime she never committed. But she wasn't going to give them that. She lifted her chin, her breath slow, steady. Because if they thought she was just another pawn in their game, they had no idea what was coming next. David Cole was done running. For the last 12 hours, he had been hunted, beaten, framed, and forced into hiding like a fugitive. They had taken everything, his career, his reputation, his family. But if they thought he was just going to disappear, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Standing in the dimly lit safe house, he wiped the blood from the cut on his temple and straightened. His body ached from the beatings, his ribs sore from where Burke's baton had landed earlier that night. But none of that mattered now. He pulled out the burner phone he had picked up from a gas station a few miles back and dialed a number from memory. 1 ring. 2. Then a familiar voice picked up. Cole? Deputy Director Raymond Hayes sounded half shocked, half wary. David didn't waste time. I need a team. Now. There was a pause. Hayes was one of the few people in the FBI David still trusted. He knew the kind of man David was. But even Hayes had seen the media storm, the fabricated charges, the warrant labeling David as a fugitive. Jesus, David, they've got the whole damn country looking for you, Hayes muttered. You know how bad this looks. David exhaled. He could imagine the headlines, FBI agent turned fugitive spotted. He knew exactly what they were saying about him. I don't care how it looks, he said, his voice sharp, unshaken. You've seen the reports. They planted those drugs. They rigged this whole thing. And now they've got my wife and son in custody. Another pause. Then Hayes sighed. Where are you? David hesitated. He trusted Hayes, but he couldn't take any chances, not after what had happened with the precinct. I need you to meet me first, David said. Alone. You realize how insane that sounds? David gritted his teeth. You realize what they'll do to my family if we don't move now? Silence. Then Hayes muttered a curse under his breath. All right. Name the place. David gave him an abandoned airstrip just outside the city. No cameras. No cops. Neutral ground. Then he hung up. 2 hours later, David stood at the edge of the airstrip, watching as a black SUV rumbled down the dirt road, headlights cutting through the night. The SUV rolled to a stop, and Hayes stepped out, his expression tense. Behind him, 2 more men climbed out, FBI agents Tyler Novak and Chris Delgado. Both men had worked under David for years. Both men had once sworn loyalty to him. But now, David could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Jesus, Cole, Novak muttered, taking in the state of him, the bruises, the torn shirt, the dried blood on his face. You look like hell. David gave a dry chuckle. Feels worse than it looks. Delgado crossed his arms. You better have something big, man. Right now, the entire bureau thinks you've lost it. David didn't blame them. To them, he had gone from FBI director to national fugitive in less than a day. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Rollins, Grayson, and their corrupt officers had been careful. But they had made one mistake. David still had the truth. And he still had his instincts. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "I've got proof," he said. Hayes frowned. "Proof of what?" David's eyes burned with determination. "Proof that Rollins, Grayson, and Burke framed me. Proof that they planted those drugs in my home. Proof that this entire setup was ordered by someone higher up, someone we haven't even touched yet." Delgado exhaled sharply. "You actually have something?" David nodded. "When I was in that precinct, Rollins got cocky," he said. "He bragged about how airtight this setup was. What he didn't know was that I was recording." He held up a small, black earpiece, one he had hidden in the seam of his jacket. "Audio?" Novak asked, eyes widening. David nodded. Rollins' own voice was on this drive, admitting to the frame job, laughing about how the media would eat up every lie they planted. Hayes exhaled. "If this is legit," he said slowly, "we can use this to blow the case open." David didn't hesitate. "It's legit." Novak took a slow step forward. "Okay. Say we believe you. Say this is real. What's the plan?" David didn't blink. "We take them down." Delgado let out a dry chuckle. "Take down who, exactly?" "This is bigger than just a few dirty cops." David met his gaze. "You're right," he said. "This isn't just about Rollins. This goes all the way up." Hayes narrowed his eyes. "To who?" David's jaw tightened. "To whoever gave the order to bury me." For a moment, no one spoke. They all knew what that meant. This wasn't just about clearing David's name anymore. This was about exposing something much deeper, much more dangerous. A network of corruption. A system that had already decided he was guilty before he even had a chance to fight. Hayes rubbed his face. "You do realize what you're asking, right?" David nodded. "I'm asking you to choose," he said. "Do you want the truth? Or do you want to keep pretending that the Bureau is clean?" Silence. Then Novak sighed. "Hell." He turned to Delgado. "You in?" Delgado gave a slow nod. Hayes didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "I'll make some calls." David finally allowed himself to breathe. For the first time in 12 hours, he wasn't alone. And now, the real fight was about to begin. The black SUV rumbled down the empty stretch of highway, headlights cutting through the dark as David Cole sat in the back seat, his mind racing. The tension in the vehicle was thick. Hayes drove with tight knuckles on the wheel, while Novak and Delgado sat in the front, quietly listening to the police scanner as chatter filled the airwaves. They were heading straight into the belly of the beast, the very precinct that had beaten, framed, and nearly buried David. And this time, he wasn't walking in alone. The plan was simple but dangerous. They had evidence, proof of Rollins' corruption, of the drugs planted in David's home, of the false charges. But evidence meant nothing if it never saw the light of day. If they went through normal channels, it would be buried, twisted, rewritten. They had to take control of the precinct before Rollins and his men had time to erase their tracks. Hayes glanced at David through the rearview mirror. "You ready for this?" David met his eyes without hesitation. "I've been ready since the moment they put cuffs on my wife and son." Novak checked his weapon. "We go in clean. No unnecessary force. But if they draw, we handle it." David nodded. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for justice. The El Paso precinct loomed ahead, the dull glow of its floodlights making it look like a fortress in the night. At this hour, the building was quiet, the late shift keeping watch. But David knew better than to underestimate them. The officers inside weren't just corrupt, they were desperate men protecting their own survival. The SUV slowed at the curb, and Hayes reached for his radio. "All teams in position?" A voice crackled in response. "Affirmative." Back entrance covered, comms locked down. David inhaled deeply. This was it. They stepped out of the SUV and moved toward the front doors. Delgado took point, flashing his badge at the officer behind the reception desk. The man barely had time to react before Delgado's voice cut through the silence. FBI. Step away from the desk. Now. The officer froze, confusion flashing across his face before he reached for his radio. David moved fast, yanking the radio from his hands before he could get a word out. Don't bother, David said. Your comms are jammed. The officer hesitated, his eyes darting toward the security cameras. He didn't know what to do. Hayes leaned in. Call your watch commander. Tell him to meet us in the bullpen. Now. The officer swallowed hard and picked up the desk phone, his fingers shaking as he dialed. David kept his eyes on the hallway ahead. He knew who they were really looking for. Rollins. Minutes later, they pushed through the double doors leading into the heart of the precinct, the bullpen where officers gathered between shifts, where case files were processed, where everything came together. A dozen officers stood at their desks, their conversations halting as David and his team entered. Some immediately reached for their holsters. Nobody move. Novak's voice rang out, firm and commanding. This is a federal operation. Hands where we can see them. Silence. Then a slow clap broke through the tension. Rollins. He stepped out from an office in the back, a smirk curling on his lips, his badge shining under the fluorescent lights. Well, he drawled. Look who finally grew a backbone. David didn't flinch. We have the evidence, David said, his voice steady. Your confession. The drug plant. The setup. It's all here. He held up the flash drive. And we're taking this precinct into federal custody. Rollins laughed. Evidence? He shook his head. You really think anybody's gonna believe a fugitive over a decorated officer? David took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough that only Rollins could hear. You don't get it, do you? He said. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about you. Your career. Your dirty little deals. Your entire network of corruption that you thought nobody would ever expose. Rollins' smirk faltered. David had seen that look before. It was the moment when a man realized he was losing. Hayes stepped forward. Sergeant Rollins, you are hereby placed under federal investigation. You and every officer involved in the framing of Director Cole will be relieved of duty immediately. For the first time, Rollins' mask cracked. You're making a mistake, he growled. David stared him down. No, he said. You did. Suddenly, a chair scraped against the floor. Another officer, standing at the far side of the bullpen, reached for his weapon. Novak moved instantly, drawing his gun. Don't do it. For a long, tense moment, no one breathed. Then, slowly, the officer raised his hands and backed away. The spell was broken. One by one, other officers began stepping away from their desks, lifting their hands. Some of them were in on it, but not all. Some were just doing their jobs. And now that the lie was unraveling, they weren't about to throw themselves onto a sinking ship. Rollins' fists clenched. He had lost. Hayes motioned to two federal agents standing by the door. Take him in. The agents moved fast, grabbing Rollins' arms and snapping on the cuffs. David watched as the man who had destroyed his life, who had torn his family apart, was finally led out of the precinct like the criminal he was. But he wasn't done yet. There were still more names. More people pulling the strings. And David was going to find them all. No matter what it took. The night air was thick with tension as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the windows of the El Paso precinct. Reporters crowded outside the building, their cameras rolling, microphones raised, eager to capture whatever was happening inside. David Cole had spent his entire career dealing with the media, but never like this. Never as the man they had labeled a fugitive, a criminal. He had spent hours watching them twist the truth, watching them take carefully curated clips and sound bites and turn them into a smear campaign against him and his family. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, he was in control of the story. Inside the precinct, Rollins sat at his desk, his hands clenched around the armrests of his chair, his mouth a tight line. He had been backed into a corner, and he knew it. The officers who had once stood at his side had started stepping away, distancing themselves from him the moment David and his team walked in with evidence. For years, Rollins had operated with impunity, believing himself untouchable. He had used his badge as a weapon, twisting the system to his advantage, confident that no one would ever hold him accountable. But now, his lies were unraveling in front of a live audience. Outside, the largest news stations in the country were already broadcasting his downfall in real time. A television in the corner of the room blared the coverage. The anchor, a sharp-suited man with neatly styled hair, spoke with forced gravity. Breaking news out of El Paso tonight, where an intense scene is unfolding at the city's Central Police Precinct. Federal agents, led by former FBI Director David Cole, have entered the building, reportedly with evidence linking Sergeant Victor Rollins to an elaborate scheme involving fabricated charges, planted evidence, and widespread corruption. The feed cut to a shaky live shot from outside the precinct, where reporters were swarming, trying to get a glimpse inside. David didn't turn to watch. He didn't need to. He was living it. Rollins finally spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "You don't have the authority to do this." David took a step forward, his hazel eyes locked onto the man who had tried to destroy his life. "You stopped having authority the moment you framed an innocent man." Rollins scoffed, shaking his head. "You think this little show is going to save you? You think people are just going to forget what they've seen all over the news?" David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it up between two fingers. "This," he said, his voice steady, "is a recording of you admitting to everything. The setup. The planted evidence. The fact that you were working with someone higher up to bury me and my family. And as we speak, this is being uploaded to every major news outlet in the country." Rollins' face paled. David leaned in. "You wanted a story, Rollins? Now you're the headline." Hayes, standing at David's side, pulled out his radio. "Secure the perimeter. This precinct is now under federal investigation." Two agents stepped forward, their expressions blank, professional. "Sergeant Victor Rollins," one of them said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, "you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and falsifying evidence." For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then Rollins did something David had been expecting. He lunged. His hand went for his gun, but David was faster. Before Rollins could even clear his holster, David grabbed his wrist and twisted, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. A second later, Novak and Delgado had him pinned against the desk, forcing his hands behind his back as the cuffs clicked shut. Outside, the cameras caught everything. A reporter's voice rang out over the live feed. "We're seeing movement inside. Hold on, it looks like, yes, we can confirm that Sergeant Victor Rollins is being taken into custody." This is unprecedented. Just moments ago, Rollins was one of the highest-ranking officers in this precinct, and now he's being escorted out in handcuffs by federal agents. Unbelievable. The door burst open as Rollins was dragged outside, his face red with fury, his body tense with resistance. The moment the reporters saw him, they surged forward. "Sergeant Rollins, do you have anything to say about the accusations against you? Rollins, is it true that you falsified evidence against Director Cole? Who were you working with?" The flashes from the cameras blinded him, the shouts and questions hitting him from every direction. David stepped out into the night, the cool air filling his lungs, the weight on his chest lifting for the first time since this nightmare began. He had dreamed about this moment, Rollins being dragged into the spotlight, exposed for what he really was. Rollins turned to him, his lips curling in a sneer, his voice dripping with venom. "This isn't over." David didn't blink. "Oh, I know," he said quietly. Because Rollins was just a piece of the puzzle. The real fight was just beginning. The air inside the FBI's temporary command post was thick with tension. The small, windowless room smelled of stale coffee and sweat, a stark contrast to the crisp efficiency of the agents working around David Cole. He sat at a desk, eyes locked on a glowing monitor, fingers drumming against the wood as a slow-loading file inched toward completion. He was close. For hours, he had sifted through every shred of evidence recovered from the precinct raid, scanning files, listening to recorded calls, tracking financial transactions. Rollins had been the first domino to fall, but David knew he had never been the true mastermind behind this conspiracy. Rollins was just a tool, a dirty cop following orders from someone higher up. And now, the pieces were starting to come together. Hayes leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You think you got him?" David didn't look away from the screen. "I think I have a name, but I need proof." Novak, standing by the whiteboard littered with photos and pinned documents, exhaled sharply. "It's gotta be someone big." Rollins wouldn't have had the power to keep this going on his own. David finally turned to face them. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. "It's Governor Harrington." A heavy silence fell over the room. Delgado, sitting across the desk, let out a low whistle. "The governor? As in the guy who's been all over the news talking about cracking down on crime? The same one who called you a disgrace to law enforcement last night?" David's lip curled. "The same one." Hayes rubbed his face. "Jesus, Cole. That's a hell of an accusation. You better have something solid." David leaned forward, clicking a folder open on the screen. A list of transactions appeared, large sums of money shifting between shell companies, offshore accounts, and names that didn't exist. "It all comes back to this fund Harrington set up 2 years ago," David said. "A state initiative to fight organized crime, with millions of dollars allocated to local precincts." He paused, tapping the screen. "Except most of that money never went where it was supposed to." Novak stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Where did it go?" David clicked another file. "Campaign funds. Personal accounts under aliases. And some of it? Directly to precincts like the one Rollins ran." Realization flickered across their faces. Delgado swore under his breath. He was paying off departments to bury cases, to control which crimes were solved and which ones disappeared. David nodded. Harrington used the police as his own private enforcers. They made sure his friends stayed clean and his enemies were silenced. His voice hardened. "That's why they went after me." The room was dead quiet. David exhaled, the weight of the discovery pressing against his ribs. He had suspected this for days, but seeing it in black and white was something else entirely. Hayes sat down across from him. "We can't take this to the press." "Not yet." "A sitting governor? This has to go through the right channels, or it'll get buried before it even makes the evening news." David's fingers clenched. "We don't have time for the right channels. Harrington's got connections everywhere. If he gets wind of this, he'll disappear before we can touch him." Novak crossed his arms. "Then what's the play?" David's mind worked fast. "We need to catch him in the act. He's too careful to leave a direct paper trail, but if we push the right buttons, we can force him to make a mistake." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that?" David leaned back in his chair. "We make him think Rollins talked." A slow grin spread across Delgado's face. "I like it. We plant the idea that Rollins flipped, and Harrington will start scrambling." David nodded. "He'll try to cover his tracks. Move money. Shut people up. And if we're watching, we'll catch him doing it." Hayes exhaled and stood. "All right. But we do this carefully. If this goes sideways, we're all done. David glanced back at the screen, watching as another file finished loading. Harrington had played this game for years, using men like Rollins to do his dirty work. But he had underestimated one thing. David Cole wasn't just another pawn in his game. He was about to flip the whole damn board. The dark road leading up to Governor Harrington's mansion twisted through sprawling hills, lined with towering oak trees that cast long, shifting shadows under the dim glow of the estate's security lights. David Cole sat behind the wheel of a black SUV, watching the guards stationed at the front gate. They were exactly what he expected: private security, not cops, ex-military types hired to keep the wrong people out and the right people from seeing too much. David wasn't planning to knock on the front door. From the moment he uncovered Harrington's corruption, he knew the governor would be untouchable through normal channels. A man like that didn't leave loose ends. He controlled the narrative, buried problems before they ever surfaced. The only way to take him down was to catch him admitting to the crime himself. And for that, David had to get inside. He pulled a small earpiece from his pocket, securing it in place. On the other end of the signal, Hayes' voice crackled through the line. Testing, testing, Cole, you copy? David tapped the earpiece. Loud and clear. Tell me you've got a solid entry point, Hayes muttered. That place is a fortress. David adjusted the dark jacket he wore over his black turtleneck, blending into the night. Security's focused on the front. But the estate backs up to a ravine. There's an access road leading to a service entrance. Delgado's voice cut in. You sure about this? If you get caught, there's no talking your way out of it. David smirked, slipping out of the SUV and making his way toward the tree line. Then I won't get caught. The climb up the ravine was brutal, thick brush, sharp rocks, and steep inclines that would have been impossible if he weren't running on sheer adrenaline. His ribs throbbed from the beating he had taken back at the precinct, but he pushed through the pain. This was the final piece. At the edge of the property, he crouched low, taking in his surroundings. The governor's mansion loomed ahead, a monument to wealth and power. Spotlights illuminated the grand facade, but David wasn't interested in the front. His eyes locked onto the side balcony on the second floor, just above a narrow ledge. He checked his watch, almost midnight. If his intel was correct, Harrington would be in his private study around this time, enjoying a drink and making the kind of calls men like him didn't want on record. David pulled a small grappling hook from his pack. He had used these tools for undercover ops before, but never to infiltrate a sitting governor's mansion. First time for everything. With a practiced flick, he secured the line and climbed, muscles burning with every pull. When he reached the ledge, he pressed his back against the stone wall and exhaled. Step 1, complete. Slipping inside was easier than he expected. The balcony doors weren't alarmed, probably because no one expected someone to scale a damn cliff to break in. The moment he was inside, he moved with the silence of a ghost, slipping through the dimly lit hallways toward Harrington's study. Voices drifted down the corridor. David pressed against the wall, listening. It's handled. No one is going to touch this. Harrington's voice. Calm. Confident. The voice of a man who believed himself untouchable. David crept closer, peering through the slight gap in the door. The study was a masterpiece of excess, a grand mahogany desk, walls lined with rare books, a fireplace crackling in the corner. And behind the desk, Governor Clyde Harrington sat with a glass of whiskey in hand, speaking into his phone. David slipped inside, staying in the shadows. His heart pounded, but his breathing remained steady. He had one chance to get this right. Harrington leaned back in his chair, swirling the glass in his hand. I don't care what the feds have. Rollins was sloppy, and now he's paying for it. But me? I'm not sloppy. He chuckled. David Cole's finished. His wife's in custody, his name's dirt, and soon, he won't even exist. David pressed record on his hidden mic. Harrington took a slow sip of his drink. We've controlled this state for years. A little scandal? Please. I have judges in my pocket, police chiefs begging for my favor, and senators who owe me their careers. David stepped forward. That so? Harrington froze, his glass hovering midair. He turned, his eyes narrowing at the figure standing in the dark corner of his study. Well, Harrington murmured, setting the glass down. I should have known you wouldn't go quietly. David took another step forward, his voice calm but firm. You talk a lot when you think no one's listening. The governor smiled, leaning back. That's because I never say anything I can't deny. David tilted his head. Funny. I think a jury would say otherwise. Harrington's expression didn't waver, but David saw it, the flicker of doubt, the brief calculation behind those eyes. He wasn't sure what David had, and that uncertainty was cracking his armor. You have nothing, Harrington said smoothly. And even if you did, who do you think will believe you? You're a fugitive. A man who attacked his own precinct. David took another step forward, pressing just enough to let Harrington feel the shift in power. Rollins is in cuffs. Your little money laundering scheme? Traced. And your voice? Recorded. Harrington's jaw tightened. You have no idea who you're up against. David smirked. I know exactly who I'm up against. A man who built his empire on fear. A man who thought he could control everyone. His eyes darkened. But you never controlled me. Harrington's hand twitched toward the desk drawer. David moved first. Before the governor could reach the gun hidden inside, David grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the desk. Harrington gasped as his drink spilled, the whiskey soaking into his expensive suit. The governor struggled, but David leaned in, voice a whisper of steel. It's over. Harrington's breathing was ragged, his arrogance slipping as the weight of reality set in. You're making a mistake, he hissed. David pulled back, meeting his gaze. No, he said quietly. You did. A moment later, Hayes' voice crackled in his earpiece. We're in position. Move now. David grabbed Harrington by the arm and hauled him toward the door. Tonight, justice wasn't just coming for Harrington. It was already here. David barely had time to shove Governor Harrington through the door before the first gunshot cracked through the mansion. The bullet shattered a framed portrait on the wall just inches from his head, glass raining down as he dragged the governor forward, using him as a shield. The guards had been waiting. Harrington's private security force wasn't just ex-cops with itchy trigger fingers. These were trained killers, militia, hired muscle, the kind of men who followed orders without asking questions. And right now, their only job was to make sure David Cole didn't leave this mansion alive. David shoved the governor ahead of him, yanking his sidearm free. Tell them to stand down, or you're going out first. Harrington let out a ragged breath, but his lips curled into a sneer. You really think they care what happens to me? A second shot rang out, tearing into the wooden banister behind them. David moved fast, ducking behind the heavy oak desk as another round shattered the window, the cold night air rushing in. Hayes' voice crackled in his earpiece. Cole. We've got movement, 5 hostiles, tactical gear, semi-auto rifles. They're locking this place down. David glanced at Harrington, who was coughing from the dust kicked up by gunfire. Of course. Harrington had planned for this. If anything ever went wrong, he had a private army ready to clean up the mess. David gritted his teeth. We don't have time for subtlety, Hayes. Get your team inside, now. More rounds tore into the walls as the guards advanced. Footsteps pounded down the hall, coming closer. David flattened against the desk, checked his ammo, 4 rounds left. Not nearly enough. Another shot clipped the corner of the desk, with splintering, making Harrington yelp. The governor tried to scramble away, but David grabbed him by the collar and slammed him down. You're staying with me, he growled. More gunfire erupted from the hallway, closer now, boots crunching over shattered glass. Then, suddenly, a deafening explosion from the front of the mansion. The gunfire staggered, the guards shouting in confusion. David took his chance. He spun out from behind the desk, squeezing off 2 shots, one hitting a guard in the chest, sending him crashing back, the other grazing another man's shoulder, making him drop his rifle. The distraction was enough. Hayes' team breached the front entrance, flashbangs detonating in the grand foyer. White light flared as another explosion sent a shockwave through the house, and then gunfire erupted in all directions. David pulled Harrington to his feet, dragging him toward the main hall. A guard appeared in the doorway. David barely had time to react before a shot rang out behind him, taking the man down. He turned to see Novak lowering his weapon, nodding. "You good?" David shoved Harrington toward him. "Get him outside." Novak grabbed the governor by the arm and started hauling him toward the exit as Hayes and Delgado laid down suppressive fire, forcing the remaining militia back toward the rear of the house. The firefight intensified, the pop of semi-automatic rifles, the deep boom of shotgun blasts, the harsh, panicked shouts of men who had never expected a real fight. David reloaded, scanning the battlefield. They had seconds to move. He spotted a break in the chaos, a corridor leading to the back of the house. If the militia was falling back, it meant one thing. They had a plan B. David ran after them, his boots skidding over broken glass and debris. Hayes called after him, but he didn't stop. Through the smoke and flashing lights, he saw them. 3 men, sprinting toward a side door, one of them carrying a briefcase. David didn't think. He fired 2 rounds, the first missed, but the second took down the man with the case, sending him sprawling across the marble floor. The other 2 turned, raising their weapons. David dove just in time, rolling behind an overturned table as bullets tore through the air above him. He fired again, 1 shot, 1 hit. The last man turned to run, but David was faster. He tackled him from behind, slamming him into the ground, wrenching the gun from his grip. The man struggled, but David pressed his knee into his back, pinning him. "Who gave the kill order?" he snarled. The guard spat blood, glaring. "You're dead either way." David didn't waste another second. He slammed his fist into the guard's temple, knocking him out cold. Footsteps rushed toward him, Hayes and Delgado appearing through the haze. "You got what you needed?" Hayes asked, breathless. David grabbed the briefcase from the fallen man and popped it open. Inside was cash, burner phones, and a single USB drive. A slow, grim smile crossed his face. "Oh yeah," he muttered. "I got it." Outside, sirens blared, FBI backup finally arriving, floodlights washing over the mansion. David took a deep breath, stepping through the wreckage, past the bodies of Harrington's men, past the shattered glass and burning furniture. They had won the battle. But the war wasn't over yet. The courtroom was packed. Rows of reporters, spectators, and officials filled every available seat, their eyes fixed on the front of the room where 2 men sat, their fates hanging in the balance. Governor Clyde Harrington, once a man who moved through the world with untouchable arrogance, now sat hunched over in his tailored suit, the weight of reality pressing his shoulders downward. Beside him, Victor Rollins, the man who had led the charge to destroy David Cole's life, glared straight ahead, jaw clenched, his hands cuffed in his lap. David sat a few rows back, watching them, the tension in his chest refusing to fade. He had spent months fighting to get here, 12 hours of pure hell just to survive, then weeks of carefully stacking the evidence, working with Hayes and his team to make sure that neither of these men could worm their way out of justice. And now, after everything, this was it. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, cleared his throat and shifted through the documents in front of him. In the case of the United States versus Clyde Harrington, he began, his voice steady, "This court finds the defendant guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, racketeering, and abuse of power." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Harrington didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just sat there, staring at nothing, as if his mind couldn't process the words. The judge turned his gaze to Rollins. In the case of the United States versus Victor Rollins, this court finds the defendant guilty of conspiracy, falsifying evidence, unlawful imprisonment, and aggravated assault. A wave of satisfaction rolled through David, but he didn't let it show. He just watched, waiting for it to sink in. Rollins, unlike Harrington, wasn't silent. He slammed his hands against the table, rattling his cuffs, face red with fury. "This is bull." The bailiffs moved instantly, gripping his arms and forcing him back into his seat. The judge barely spared him a glance. "You'll have plenty of time to reflect on that in federal prison, Mr. Rollins." David exhaled slowly, his grip on the chair's armrests loosening. This was the moment he had been fighting for. Harrington, the powerful man who thought himself untouchable, was going to prison for life. Rollins, the dirty cop who thought he could play executioner, would spend the next 20 years behind bars. Justice. It should have felt like a victory. It should have felt like the weight of the world finally lifting off his shoulders. But as he sat there, watching Harrington's legal team whisper furiously in his ear, something felt off. Maybe it was because no sentence could erase what had happened, the damage done, the lives ruined, the pain that couldn't be undone. Or maybe it was because not every battle had been won. The gavel slammed, and the court was dismissed. David stood, watching as the bailiffs led Rollins and Harrington away, their heads down, their futures no longer in their own hands. A voice sounded at his side. "Hayes." "You did it," he murmured. "You got them both." David nodded, but his voice was quiet when he answered. "Yeah. But at what cost?" Because he knew, even as he walked out of that courtroom, even as the cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, even as the city itself breathed a sigh of relief that justice had been served, he had still lost something he could never get back. David Cole sat at the small wooden table in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the crisp white envelope in his hands. It had arrived earlier that morning, delivered with quiet finality by a courier who hadn't even made eye contact. His name was printed neatly on the front in Sarah's handwriting, the same handwriting he had once loved, once traced over in love notes and birthday cards. But this time, there was nothing affectionate about it. He had known this was coming. Still, that didn't make it any easier. He ran his thumb over the edge of the envelope, hesitating, as if delaying the moment would somehow change its contents. But delaying wouldn't undo what had already been set in motion. With a deep breath, he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Sarah had filed for divorce, and she was taking Jordan with her. David's chest tightened as he read the words over and over, willing them to make sense. It felt unreal. After everything, after surviving gunfights, manhunts, betrayals, after risking his life to clear his name, this was what was waiting for him at the end of it all. He placed the paper down carefully, his hands trembling slightly. The words blurred together, but one sentence stood out, burning into his brain. "This life is not what I want for our son." David exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair, rubbing a hand down his face. He couldn't even be angry. He had always known how much Sarah hated this part of his life, the danger, the long nights, the feeling that any moment, a knock on the door could mean the worst had happened. She had stayed through so much. But this time, he had asked too much of her. The scandal, the wrongful arrest, the media circus that had turned their home into a prison. And worst of all, Jordan. Their son had been dragged into it. David could still hear the fear in his boy's voice from that night, the night the cops had stormed their home, cuffing Sarah and throwing Jordan to the ground like he was a criminal. The 12-year-old had sobbed and screamed for his mother, for his father, for someone to explain what was happening. David had been helpless to stop it. And Sarah would never forgive him for that. A knock at the door broke him from his thoughts. For a brief, ridiculous second, his heart leapt, as if it might be Sarah standing there, waiting, second-guessing her decision. But he already knew better. He stood, his movements sluggish, and opened the door. Hayes stood there, his expression unreadable, holding 2 takeout cups of coffee. He took one look at David and sighed. "She filed, huh?" David gave a short, humorless chuckle, stepping aside so Hayes could enter. "You always this good at ruining surprises?" Hayes shut the door behind him, setting the coffee on the table before sitting down. "I saw her lawyer's name on the courthouse filings this morning. Figured I'd come before you started throwing things." David sat across from him, shaking his head. "I don't even have the energy for that." Hayes steadied him for a moment before exhaling. "I know you wanted a different ending." David swallowed, his throat tight. "It wasn't just about me. It was about them. I thought," he broke off, staring at the divorce papers again. His voice was quieter when he spoke. "I thought if I could fix this, I could fix everything else, too." Hayes tapped his fingers against the table. "You didn't do this, David." David let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't I?" He gestured around the apartment, to the half-empty moving boxes, to the pictures missing from the walls. "If I had just walked away from this job sooner, if I had taken that desk position in D.C. when she asked." "You would have hated yourself," Hayes interrupted. "And you would have resented her for it." David didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew Hayes was right. But that didn't make the pain any easier. Hayes leaned forward. "Listen to me. You did what you had to do. You stopped Rollins. You took down Harrington. You saved countless people from being victims of the same system that nearly buried you." David met his eyes. "And what do I have to show for it?" Hayes hesitated before saying, "The truth." David ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Yeah. Great trade." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Hayes stood, grabbing his coffee. "You going to see Jordan before they leave?" David's stomach twisted. "I don't know if I can." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Then you better figure it out, Cole. Because once they go, it's not going to get any easier." David nodded, but even as he agreed, he felt like he was already losing the most important fight of his life. David Cole sat at the small wooden table in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the crisp white envelope in his hands. It had arrived earlier that morning, delivered with quiet finality by a courier who hadn't even made eye contact. His name was printed neatly on the front in Sarah's handwriting, the same handwriting he had once loved, once traced over in love notes and birthday cards. But this time, there was nothing affectionate about it. He had known this was coming. Still, that didn't make it any easier. He ran his thumb over the edge of the envelope, hesitating, as if delaying the moment would somehow change its contents. But delaying wouldn't undo what had already been set in motion. With a deep breath, he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Sarah had filed for divorce. And she was taking Jordan with her. David's chest tightened as he read the words over and over, willing them to make sense. It felt unreal. After everything, after surviving gunfights, manhunts, betrayals, after risking his life to clear his name, this was what was waiting for him at the end of it all. He placed the paper down carefully, his hands trembling slightly. The words blurred together, but one sentence stood out, burning into his brain. "This life is not what I want for our son." David exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair, rubbing a hand down his face. He couldn't even be angry. He had always known how much Sarah hated this part of his life, the danger, the long nights, the feeling that any moment, a knock on the door could mean the worst had happened. She had stayed through so much. But this time, he had asked too much of her. The scandal, the wrongful arrest, the media circus that had turned their home into a prison. And worst of all, Jordan. Their son had been dragged into it. David could still hear the fear in his boy's voice from that night, the night the cops had stormed their home, cuffing Sarah and throwing Jordan to the ground like he was a criminal. The 12-year-old had sobbed and screamed for his mother, for his father, for someone to explain what was happening. David had been helpless to stop it. And Sarah would never forgive him for that. A knock at the door broke him from his thoughts. For a brief, ridiculous second, his heart leapt, as if it might be Sarah standing there, waiting, second-guessing her decision. But he already knew better. He stood, his movements sluggish, and opened the door. Hayes stood there, his expression unreadable, holding 2 takeout cups of coffee. He took one look at David and sighed. "She filed, huh?" David gave a short, humorless chuckle, stepping aside so Hayes could enter. "You always this good at ruining surprises?" Hayes shut the door behind him, setting the coffee on the table before sitting down. "I saw her lawyer's name on the courthouse filings this morning. Figured I'd come before you started throwing things." David sat across from him, shaking his head. "I don't even have the energy for that." Hayes studied him for a moment before exhaling. "I know you wanted a different ending." David swallowed, his throat tight. "It wasn't just about me. It was about them. I thought," he broke off, staring at the divorce papers again. His voice was quieter when he spoke. "I thought if I could fix this, I could fix everything else, too." Hayes tapped his fingers against the table. "You didn't do this, David." David let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't I?" He gestured around the apartment, to the half-empty moving boxes, to the pictures missing from the walls. "If I had just walked away from this job sooner, if I had taken that desk position in D.C. when she asked." "You would have hated yourself," Hayes interrupted. "And you would have resented her for it." David didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew Hayes was right. But that didn't make the pain any easier. Hayes leaned forward. "Listen to me. You did what you had to do. You stopped Rollins. You took down Harrington. You saved countless people from being victims of the same system that nearly buried you." David met his eyes. "And what do I have to show for it?" Hayes hesitated before saying, "The truth." David ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Yeah. Great trade." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Hayes stood, grabbing his coffee. "You going to see Jordan before they leave?" David's stomach twisted. "I don't know if I can." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Then you better figure it out, Cole. Because once they go, it's not going to get any easier." David nodded, but even as he agreed, he felt like he was already losing the most important fight of his life. David Cole stood outside the courthouse, the morning sun casting long shadows over the city. The reporters were gone, the cameras shut off, the last echoes of the biggest trial in the state's history fading into the past. Harrington and Rollins were convicted, disgraced, and stripped of the power they had abused for so long. The corruption that had nearly crushed him had been exposed, torn apart piece by piece. By every definition, he had won. And yet, as he stood there on the courthouse steps, he had never felt more alone. The wind carried the distant hum of city traffic, but David barely heard it. He looked down at his hands, strong, steady, the hands of a man who had spent his life fighting for justice. But those same hands had lost the most important things in his life. He had seen Sarah and Jordan for the last time that morning. No screaming. No dramatic goodbyes. Just quiet, painful finality. Jordan had hugged him, gripping his shirt like he didn't want to let go, but the reality had already settled in his young eyes. Sarah had been polite, distant. And when they had driven away, David had stood there, watching, knowing he wouldn't be able to chase them this time. Now, standing in front of the courthouse, the weight of everything pressed down on him. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "You gonna stand there all day, or are you coming to eat?" David turned. Hayes stood near the curb, hands in his pockets, a tired but knowing look on his face. David let out a breath and shook his head. "Not hungry." Hayes scoffed. "That's a damn lie." David didn't argue. Hayes stepped closer, his tone losing its teasing edge. "It's over, Cole. You did it." David's jaw tightened. "Yeah. And?" David exhaled, staring at the street ahead. "I should feel relieved," he admitted. "Hell, I should feel proud. I stopped them. I did my job. I won. Hayes studied him. But David looked away. But what's left? Silence stretched between them. Hayes finally sighed, running a hand over his face. You didn't do this for a trophy, Cole. You did this because it was the right thing. David let out a dry chuckle. Tell that to my empty house. Hayes didn't have an answer for that. And really, what could he say? David had always known justice came at a cost. But he had never expected that cost to be everything he had built outside of the badge. He thought back to the long nights at home, the quiet laughter at the dinner table, the life he had built with Sarah and Jordan. A life that no longer existed. Hayes clapped a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort. You're not alone, you know. David forced a smirk. Yeah, feels like it. You still got a job, Hayes reminded him. Still got a name. Hell, the Bureau's probably gonna want to pin a damn medal on you for this. David shook his head. That's not why I did it. Hayes nodded. I know. He hesitated. So, what now? David stared at the horizon. He didn't know. The fight was over. The battle was won. But the victory felt hollow. He had spent his entire career fighting for something bigger than himself. But now, he was the one left standing in the wreckage. No home. No family. Just a badge. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if that was enough. Justice often comes at a cost. In life, doing the right thing isn't always rewarded with comfort or happiness. Sometimes, standing up for what's right means losing people you love, enduring hardships, or carrying burdens that no one else can see. David Cole's story is a reminder that integrity isn't about personal gain, it's about doing what must be done, even when the world stands against you. For many, life brings choices that test our values. Do we speak up against wrongdoing, even if it costs us friendships? Do we stay true to ourselves, even when it's easier to compromise? The truth is, real victories aren't always celebrated. Some battles are fought quietly, in the way we treat others, and the way we hold ourselves accountable. At the end of the day, what matters most isn't recognition, it's knowing you did what was right. And even in loss, even in loneliness, there is strength in standing firm. Because character isn't built in moments of ease, but in the fire of trials. So, when faced with hard choices, remember, peace comes not from the world's approval, but from a conscience that knows no regret.